Welcome to episode 3 of the Silver Savage podcast. This episode is brought to you by Combat Iron Apparel, the highest quality apparel for those who enjoy fitness and patriotism every day. Use the code SilverSavage10 on checkout off their website combatironapparel.com to get 10% off your next order. This episode is also brought to you by Masada Tactical, Silver Savage podcast parent company. Use the code SilverSavage10 on checking out from their website to get 10% off any future training to enhance your self-protection, self-defense, tactical skill, medical skills, and so forth. Training.masadatactical.com. With no further ado, this episode we have a very, very famous guest. We have Ed Norris. Ed Norris is a radio host here in Baltimore. He's one of the co-hosts of the morning show on the 105.7 The Fan. He's also one of the most accomplished law enforcement officers this nation has known, leading 3 of the largest agencies in the country, including NYPD, Baltimore PD, and the Maryland State Patrol. Now, without controversy, Ed Norris did face some felony allegations and served 6 months in jail for that. So we are looking forward to the discussion and the talk with Ed Norris.
Ed Norris, the man, the myth, the legend. And I was trying to think earlier. I was talking to Steven. I couldn't remember when we met. I mean, it had to be years ago, but I can't recall because you were at my wedding, my last wedding, which was over 10 years ago. So,
yes, I brought a woman with big boobs and a low-cut dress to an Orthodox wedding. It was fantastic. Yes,
perfect. You fit right in. I had my Cubs, the friend, and my ex-wife's, rabbi's family on the other side, and it was a perfect.
It was something.
I'm all about doing things different. But anyways, Ed, I appreciate you being on our podcast. You are actually the second episode we are recording.
Cool.
We're going to start dropping them soon. And the goal is to just have a chat about, what it is like to be a male, specifically an alpha male, in our age group. So we're not 20, we're not 30 anymore, and we're driving forward. And, we still have fight in us. So we're going to have a little conversation about that.
All right.
So just to get us rolling, Ed, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, a little bit about your background so our listeners who don't know you get a better understanding.
I'm a Brooklyn, New York native. I've lived in New York City most of my life, although my life's getting longer, so a lot big portions down here, but a Brooklyn native. Joined the NYPD at 20 years old, was a member of the New York City Police Department for 20 years. So I got called to, would like to be the police commissioner of Baltimore. I was interviewing around the country because I could retire at that time. So I ended up landing in Baltimore and was the police commissioner here for 3 years, led the country in crime decline for major cities. We brought shootings down, and it was pretty optimistic time here. Then I got lured away by the governor of the state, and I became the superintendent of the Maryland State Police. I was a cast member of The Wire for 5 years. If people know the HBO series, I'm sure they've heard of it. So I was on The Wire for 5 years. I wrote a book. I've got a very varied career background. Now I've been a sports radio host for going on 17 years.
Has it been that long, really?
Next year, 17 years, yeah.
That's impressive. And so seems like at some point you made a 180, right? You went from policing to broadcasting and other media at that, right? So writing a book and being on TV. Do you mind telling us a little bit about why and how you came about it? Now you landed in that field. I mean, that is not what you were.
No. Yeah, I didn't quite do a 180. I was forced to do a 180 when I got involved in a very heated political battle at the time. I was not the guy fighting, but I was the pawn in the battle. I went from the city police to the state police, from a mayor's cabinet to the governor's cabinet, who were political rivals. And, there was a lot of speculation what would happen next. And I also, there's something that I try not to think about because it's too awful to think about, but I had the first Al-Qaeda arrest in the U.S. for murder. And it was the assassination of Meir Kahane, which was done by Al-Qaeda operatives in the U.S. in New York City. And that was in 1990. And that was a very, very unusual case where no one ever heard of it until we translated the documents. But actually, I had the plot for 9/11 in my hands. And gave it over to the feds. It was never really worked on until, long story short, it turns out that they had me release the drivers in this murder. Like, we had the shooter who was put away. The drivers were released. And the drivers in that case ended up blowing up the Trade Center in '93. They just put the van in the wrong place. The goal was the same, was to take down, as they put it, the buildings of which Americans are so proud. And they didn't have the right location or whatever, but 6 people killed, 1,000 injured. It was a horrific terrorist attack, but that was the guys I had under arrest. It turns out when those documents were translated, it was literally the plans for the 9/11 attack. And I had testified in front of Congress the month after 9/11 about this and how that the federal government had basically dropped the ball on this, in my opinion. And so some speculation that this next event was tied to that, or the political dispute between the mayor and the governor, I'll never know. But what happened was I became the subject of a federal investigation for misuse of a fund that had no taxpayer money in it. It's been in existence since the Great Depression. And they couldn't find what they were looking for. They were looking for some, big purchase. Like, lawyer would ask me, did you buy somebody a car? Or I was like, of course not. And what they did find in this investigation, it had all my bank records, obviously, and computers. And they found that when I purchased my house in Baltimore, my father had given me $9,000. I didn't need it. He just gave it to me just in case, because I had a lot of things going on then, for closing costs, for this, for that, just to make sure everything went smoothly. They found, and we signed a letter saying it was a gift. It's called a gift letter in real estate, that someone's giving you a gift of money. It's so you don't inflate your net worth. It's really meant for people that are, getting big sums of money to make it look like they have a lot of money when they buy big purchases. But anyway, they saw at some time I paid my father back the $9,000. So for paying back the money, I was actually committing a crime by putting a false statement on a mortgage application. Everybody I know does it. Everybody I grew up with in Brooklyn does it. They borrow money from their parents to buy a house, and I've never heard of it being prosecuted. I was prosecuted for it, and I was in prison for it. I was put in federal prison, got out.
And that was an ordeal too, right? If I remember correctly, your first day or something, your prison flooded, right? Weren't you moved?
It was insane. It was a crazy. Yes, I was in Florida. I was put in a camp in Eglin Air Force Base. And then 3 hurricanes were bearing down on the Panhandle in a row, the Panhandle of Florida. I was evacuated with everybody else. They just told us, it just said, get your Bible, get your religious book, and your shaving kit. Meet us wherever we had to go, like some big room auditorium. So we all get in. They put us on prison buses, shipped us to Yazoo City, Mississippi, to a maximum security prison that wasn't even open yet. And I spent a couple of months there, and then that was crazy. We had no beds, no nothing. It wasn't even open yet. Went from there, and when they finally got destinations, I went to the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta for the last couple of months. And while I was in, the feds got wind from people underneath the prosecutor in this case. He was the U.S. attorney in Maryland. But some of his assistant U.S. attorneys turned him into the Department of Justice for unethical behavior. He put out an email internally, said he wanted more front page indictments like mine by election day. And long story short, he ended up getting fired for misconduct while I was in. So I got out a month later. I was living in Tampa at the time. I'd moved to Tampa to get away from this all. A radio station in Baltimore called me and said, would you want to come on and talk about it? I was like, yeah, I'll talk about it. I'll tell everybody what happened. And so I went on and talked about it. And then it was such a well-received thing. They did a poll. Would they like to have me back as police commissioner? Like 90-something% of the callers said yes. So they said, would you want to do a segment? So I started doing a radio segment every day from house arrest in Florida. And then I was offered a full-time job as a radio host. So I moved my family back to Baltimore, and that's how it's been for the last almost 17 years. That's how I got into radio.
I didn't hear that side of the story yet, so this is the first time me hearing it. That's pretty crazy, but sometimes I guess we fall in places we didn't intend. Yeah. And
I forget how crazy the story is sometimes because I lived it. When I tell people, they sit there like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, no.
That's awesome. Part of my book.
So you do have a book. So that's actually a question I had saved up for later, but let's talk about it real quick while we're on it. So your book, Way Down in the Hole, right?
Yes.
Came out a few years ago. I have a copy already. That literally tells your story, partially at least, right?
Good portion of it. I mean, it goes from, a little bit about my childhood and in Brooklyn, and playing football in college and becoming a police officer, and it leads up to all, and so exactly the story I just told. The collapse of my career, incarceration, and kind of redemption by getting this job and repairing my reputation. Because once he got fired for misconduct, everything was viewed differently in Baltimore. So it was if not for him getting caught by the Department of Justice, my life would be much different right now.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and you can choose not to answer, but obviously that book doesn't tell all the details. I'm sure there's some stuff that, for personal reason or professional reasons, you chose not to share. Any chance of the public ever finding out those details?
Maybe. I mean, I don't even know what details I left out, because it's, I didn't leave out too much, but I always thought about it, but I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't even name certain people in there, because so many people helped me during that. Because I became so fearful of the government that I didn't want to hurt my friends. So I left a lot of people out of the book, and even in the dedication, because people did amazing things for me. I mean, just amazing things. And a lot of them were law enforcement, so I did not want to hurt their careers. But it's possible. I may have a second book in me.
Perfect. So we talk about you kind of reinventing yourself in this new media persona that you are today. And you bring out law enforcement. I know Steve is, for example, is a couple years away from retirement, and we have a lot of friends. What?
Amen.
Amen. Maybe sooner. Who knows?
I hope so.
But it's hard to be a cop these days, and we can talk about it on a different
Especially
segment.
when you have the old school mentality.
Yep.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I hear the same. It makes me sad, but I hear the same thing from law enforcement people every day. Yeah. I got 2 years. I got 3 years. I'm waiting for a drop to kick in, and that's no way to go to work every day.
No, and some people don't even want to wait that long. They realize, you know what, it's just not even worth it. But there's a lot of people that are making that transition out. We can think about military transition to civilian life, law enforcement, second career, because you can retire at mid-40s and you get a retirement from the police department. And now what do you do with your life?
I retired at 39 from the NYPD.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I came on at 20 with my vacation time, because I wanted the job as police commissioner. So I came down at 39 years old and used my vacation time to run out to my 20th years. That's how I did it. So I was 39 when I was here.
That's amazing. So what were some of your plans for after retirement? So if Baltimore City wasn't to call and reach out to you and say, come be the commissioner here, what would you have done?
I still had a lot of policing left in me. I love that work. I mean, it makes me so sad to see the way the country has turned on their police in this country. But I love it. To me, it's one of the most important jobs in the world, in any country. Right. And I had no intention of ever leaving. It was taken from me. So so for me, I didn't plan to retire. If I retired from the NYPD, because I was at that level, I was running the operation. I was the operations commissioner in New York. So you're talking about 41,000 uniformed police officers, the biggest job of its kind in the country. And people need to remember that the NYPD is about 4 times the size of the FBI. And people just don't know that. It's a huge organization. And I was sitting at the near top of it. So my career goals post New York was to do exactly what I did, run the Baltimore Police Department. I was going to run the Maryland State Police, as it turned out, and maybe get a job, to crack at running a federal agency after that. And I probably would not have retired until I was about my age now.
So here's a guy that ran probably 3 of the largest agencies in the country, right? And now you're a radio. Was there a mental switch that you had to do? I mean, how do you, because you do sport radio now, right? And I know you try to tie current events whenever possible, but it's not in your DNA per se. So how do you make that switch?
Well, again, it's amazing what you do when you have to. I mean, you talk about, it's when something like that happens to you in life, you can either kill yourself, literally, people will kill themselves over this, because I lost everything. I lost my career, my money, my freedom, my civil rights. I mean, I lost everything you can imagine. So you can, curl up in a ball and, kill yourself, crawl inside a bottle, feel sorry for yourself for the rest of your life, or you could, do something else and feed your family. So it was for me, it was just about my family. I had to provide for them, and that's how this happened. I was like, okay, I'll do this. I did that. Now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be really good at it, and I'm going to be successful. And that's what I made up my mind. And it was hard. I mean, believe me, it was hard. This was not a career choice for me. I know people love to be in radio, and I do television here too. I'm on the Fox News every week for the last 16 years.
Now, Ed, would you say, and we're all law enforcement here.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you go into law enforcement, it's definitely a calling. It's not just a job. The morals, the ethics, the principles, the loyalty, the camaraderie that you learned and was ingrained in you. Obviously, I would say that helped you through all this as well. Even though you didn't have that badge and that uniform, you still had that mentality. How did that articulate for you, if I can ask?
Well, first of all, you're right. It's just one of the things that the transition was tough in some ways, but the training really helped me get through it. Because I remember people would think, and people think, I don't care what job they have. They all think they have the most stressful job in America. And I remember my boss in the radio station where they was just, he's holding his head and walking around and, just, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. I said, hang on a second. I get it. I said, you know what pressure is? Giving the sniper the green light. That's pressure. I've done that. That's pressure. This isn't pressure. We're in the entertainment business. It's just, that's it. And so to realize, like, look, I've been at gunfights. I've been, got my finger cut off at one point in the job. We've all had dangerous things we've encountered. And to me, everything after that was easy. And that's part of it. The hardest transition was, I think, well, your point about this, the law enforcement training, the training helped tremendously. The toughness, the mental toughness you have to do this and do it for a long time and do it well. And then the support, because it is like a fraternity. It's a big camaraderie, a big brotherhood. I don't care where you are. I don't care where you are in the world. I would put forward, I think if you're a police officer, you have more in common with police officers in another country than you do with any other male in your country, because it's that unique a profession. Because I travel the world, and there are people here who they don't understand the job. They either have a bad impression of it, or they're fascinated with it, or whatever, but they don't have any idea how complicated it is, how important it is. They see cops on the street in uniform, and they think that's it. They ride around, give tickets, they arrest people occasionally. That's not it. It's they have no idea what goes into it. And I remember some of the things that really I got to lecture in Europe for a while when I was at the NYPD, because we were reducing crime in New York under Giuliani, and it became so successful that we were on the cover of Time magazine, and people came from all over the world to watch what we were doing, literally all over the world. So I got invited to places that had come. I lectured at the French National Police Academy, the German National Police Academy. I was in England. I was all over, and I remember lecturing in France and Germany, and I speak neither. And through the translator, guys were nodding their heads and shaking their head, laughing about all the problems you encounter, because it's the same all over the world. Police are the same in Paris as they are in New York, as they are in Moscow. It's the same job with the same frustrations and heartbreak and satisfaction. And I think that's really the thing that part of what got me through. And the fact that my friends did not turn their back on me when this happened. It was completely the opposite. Guys were very supportive. The village idiot knew what happened here, and they were like, "Well, my friends, they crucified you pretty high in the hill for this," and they did. I mean,
just to bring up one last point with that, because I know it's near and dear to me too, because it's kind of what we said before. Being in law enforcement for so long, you get a certain mentality, and when there's change, we resist that change. But would you say, especially for these younger officers, and anyone in whatever their profession is, I think they fail to see the qualities that they obtain within that profession that they can in turn turn to something else, kind of like what you've done. You've gone polar opposite of quote unquote a law enforcement career to something extremely successful where millions of people are listening to you. So what would you say to that?
I think we all sell ourselves short, because you have no idea how much you learn during your police career. If you're on the street, I mean, this goes for the small percentage of police officers that do that job every day, because it's like anything. It's like the military. I mean, the vast majority of the military does not fight in combat. It's the same in policing. I think in New York, it was 8% of the police in New York made the majority of the arrests. They were the ones on the street. It's huge. I mean, somebody's gonna give out the pants and fix the cars and work 9 to 5 at headquarters. But the people that do it and things you learn from dealing with people, talking to people, dealing with true crisis firsthand, everything, breaking the news to a mother that her son's been killed, and having to deal with people like that. I had a widower come to my office every day because his wife was murdered, and and dealing with people, like that through your whole life. And you can't obtain that experience anywhere else. And I remember one of the funniest lines I got was from two guys from Scotland Yard. They were in New York on business. I ended up testifying in that case in London. They were investigating members of the royal family for gem theft. And so we were out drinking in Tribeca, and a couple of FBI agents were there who we knew. And they were like, the FBI headquarters was right there. So we're all hanging out. And the FBI agent was talking to the Scotland Yard guy, saying, "Why are you hanging out with these locals? And why would you talk? What are you talking to them? We're the real police in this country." And they forget that Scotland Yard, you go from foot patrol up to, fighting terrorism like we did in New York. So the Brit told me, he said, "Mate, you should learn to crawl before you run. You ever been punched in the face by a drunk at 2 a.m? These are experiences you don't get anywhere else." And he's right. There's little things like wrestling with a drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a street corner, and things like, and talking to people and learning all these different life skills that you can't obtain anywhere else. And you see people crumble under the slightest amount of pressure. Police officers don't, because you face it so often. Unfortunately, it takes its toll on you.
Right. And you know what? So this podcast is obviously called The Silver Savage, and I think that savage part really ties in. Dealing with all those things, taking all those skills, right, and learning those hard life lessons. So you mentioned you fighting, the drunk person at 2 a.m. and so forth. I know that you box, right? Mm-hmm. Do you still box?
I box. I still train it. I started hit the bag and stuff. I still train like that. And I took more. I was in full contact karate before the MMA was out. I took Kyokushinkai. In the school was all Japanese fighters there who didn't speak any English in New York. It's the George St. Pierre style and Boss Rudin and all these guys. I studied that for a long time, and I've always been involved in this. I was certified as a knife instructor under you. I mean, I've always been interested in defending myself and learning how to be better at it.
Perfect. What else do you do for fun when you're not on radio at 5 a.m? What does Ed Norris do?
Well, since I also had a horrific motorcycle accident about 8 years ago, because I just like I use a police thing, become an adrenaline junkie, where if the 1013 isn't going off and the bells aren't ringing, you need something. So I rode motorcycles for years to work and had a terrible crash years ago. So a lot of my hobbies were taken away. What I did was I was a bow hunter. I still do jujitsu and train like that, but I've destroyed my body. I have a bunch of pins in my shoulders and I can't really do what I used to do. So I started doing other things. I still work out different ways. I just took up golf. I started doing things like that. And I try to just keep myself active, but do other things, travel more. This is the beauty of leaving policing, is that there's a world out there. And, you don't have to worry about getting called because your cops got in a shooting at 3 o'clock in the morning and one of them's in the hospital and you leave. Nobody calls me when I leave the station. So I do what I want. And if I want to go on vacation, I go on vacation. And I try to do this and lead a more normal life because it's tough. I mean, you think about all the Christmases you miss with your family, and that doesn't happen anymore. Now, the people close to you spend time with when the rest of the country does and the rest of the world does. So that's really what I've been doing. I'm trying to just lead a normal life, which is not really possible for me here, but as normal as possible. So.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I had the pleasure of going out to dinner with you a few times, and it's always interesting when you walk into a restaurant and everybody recognizes you and you get the VIP treatment. And we went for some nice places too. So
yeah, that's what I always tell people. Baltimore, it broke my heart. A bad thing happening, but we had a lot of good stuff here, and people still remember the good. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but the leadership now is so bad that it makes my time look so much better. Where people still come up to say, "God, I wish we were still in charge," despite all the other stuff. Yeah. And I get treated like a king here, I really do. And I love the city for that. And I kid around because it's so dangerous. And I said, I may be the king of hell, but I'm still the king.
I love it. I'm going to share 2 quick stories that always remind me of you. One of them is we have a mutual friend who just recently retired as a lieutenant in Baltimore Police Department, and I was doing a ride along with him one evening, and a call came out, and we both heard on the radio Baltimore 1 responding. Like, Ed Norris is responding to a call. That was unheard of, right? That the commissioner would actually respond to a call.
Because they weren't on patrol.
Yep, that was one. And then when I was the instructor at the Police Training Commission, there were stories about when you were the superintendent that you forced cops to have their duty belts on, and you kept telling them you are an officer, a police officer, be a trooper or whatever it is, and you can be at the academy, but you need to have a gun on you because that's your job.
Yeah.
And
funny you say those two, because it's like people stop me to this day. Like, they'll say, you don't remember me, but you backed me up in, on North Avenue on a car stop. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what I did. I made sure I went on patrol every day. I would never ask them to do something I wouldn't do. That was my philosophy. I would never ask you to do something, that I wouldn't do. I would go through doors with them. I would stop cars with them. And same in the state police. And when I got to the state police, the command staff, from like the lieutenant up, they weren't wearing gun belts or vests. And they'd wear, an off-duty gun with this. I go, what are you, protecting yourself at the ATM? We're the police. You're going to wear a gun belt. You're going to have extra rounds and handcuffs and a flashlight, and you're going to wear your vest. And I got the same reaction. I met some great police officers in the MSP. Mike Lewis is one that comes to mind, and there's just some really good street guys there. And I remember rolling up on them on car stops on 95, and they turn on, Colonel, what are you doing here? It's like, I'm working. But to me, that's important because you can't lead from behind. You can't lead from a desk, and that's what's missing, I think, in American law enforcement now.
Yeah, and it's still missing to this day, and I can speak empirically on that.
Yeah,
I would argue it's missing.
What happens? A lot of guys who get these jobs, they become the chief of an agency because they spent the last 14 years in headquarters, going to college, working days, administering this and that, and they don't even know how to open up a pair of handcuffs. And they don't know what the streets are like, and they don't relate to the officers. And it's a real problem because you don't know what the people who work for you actually do for a living.
Yep. And I was about to say, this is, I think, a problem that is in society as a whole right now. The whole concept of proper leadership seems to have been lost. There's a select few that still do it, and typically they come from the law enforcement or military background. Yeah. But the majority of people that we come across are just poor leaders, right?
It's an epidemic. Now, and we've all been watching it unfold, and it's heartbreaking for me, as I'm sure it is for you. I watch these guys on television now during maybe giving up our country to rioters. I'm watching the country burn down and be looted, and it continues now. We watch stores in California being looted by 80 people who obviously set it up on somehow on social media, whatever, and they go in and just steal, and nothing's done about it. And we tell our police officers, well, don't engage them because we'd rather people go out of business because they've been looted or burned out of their businesses, and you hurt one of these, scumbags, frankly, for lack of a better term. It's just, it just really breaks me out. And then I watch the leadership in the country apologizing for it. And police chiefs, instead of teaching people how to reduce crime at a time when it's skyrocketing in America, what they're getting, kudos for is teaching people to be more hands off. We're worried about, we shouldn't stop anybody. No, you need to stop people. That's why the Supreme Court decided things like Terry versus Ohio, because it's a very important tool and it's totally constitutional. And I think so many of our leaders they're cowards, frankly. They're just cowards.
Right. I believe perception, or in their mind, PR is more important than officer safety. And right? Terry versus Ohio was all about our safety when doing that stop, right?
Yeah.
I remember Stephen and I were about to go and teach defensive tactics instructor course at one agency down south. And literally a day before the class, the chief called me, and his question was, how do your skills look on camera? And I said, well, honestly, they look like shit. I mean, it's defensive tactics. I'm going to have to put hands on someone and rough them up potentially. And he says, well, we can't do that then. Like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I don't want cameras catching my officers doing that. And I was speechless. So we didn't go.
Because he has no idea what policing is like.
Right.
What it's like, because this is what is lost on people, including that guy, is that, it's one thing to lose a fight in a bar. You lose a fight as a police officer, you don't go home to your family. Right. It's a huge difference. You cannot ever lose. You have to. These are literally, you're fighting to the death. And every time you fight with somebody, there's a gun in the fight. Even if they don't have one, you have one. Right. There's always a gun in the fight. You have to do by anything necessary to win. And there were ways to do it. And people I remember I had a trainer in the New York City Academy named Al Gote. He was legendary up there. He was a 6th degree black belt in Goju. He was a real tough street guy. And he was our self-defense instructor. And he would tell us, I remember to this day, 40 years later, he's like, when you get out of here, you need to train and train and train some more all the time. He said, I don't care what style you study, just train. and I took it seriously. And guys don't understand. I remember I had hired a guy because the training here sucked so badly. It was so impractical, the self-defense training, that I hired somebody at the time he was a former Navy SEAL. And he tailored it for police, for close quarter, like the same training you provide. It's the same concept. The stuff that I've been through with you, where you're fighting in hallways and in rooms and subway cars. We had things like this in New York because that's where it happens. It doesn't happen in a gym with mats, and it's not happening in a ring. It's happening on a concrete floor, somewhere in an alley where nobody sees you. And we would train like this, but he would teach them how to do it and not, it didn't look bad. And I got private training. He was funny with me. He was like, he taught me things that he didn't teach them. He said, you're going to probably be alone if it happens, so you need to break them right away. And he's humane. He goes, then they get right to the healing. So it's quicker that way.
Right.
But the newspapers, I got crucified for. Crucified. Teaching them, military tactics, because no one understands they don't even understand that it needs to be done. It can be done humanely, but they want things to be safe, but they don't want to see how it's done. They don't have any concept. And if they see you put your hands on somebody, it's so abhorrent to people. Yeah, but that's the business we're in. You're dealing with dangerous people that have killed people, raped people, routinely, and they're not good people. And you need to be able to defend yourself against them. It all goes back to leadership. It's the same thing from your guy down south. It makes me so sad. And this is why police officers are leaving in drones now. They're just leaving in droves. They can't get out fast enough because they're disgusted with the leadership.
Yeah. And I always say I have the utmost respect to the line level officers, because those are the guys out there doing a hard job, but their leadership unfortunately doesn't support them and straight out sucks.
And they'll do what you want. They'll do if you support them, they will put their lives on the line. Yeah. Literally. I buried 7 cops here. It bothers me to this day. But they will do anything. That's why you come on this job. You don't come on you're not coming on for the money, I'll tell you that. So they're not coming on for the money. They come on because they believe in this. Like you said, it's a calling. They're true believers. They want to be like the last American heroes. And that was a speech I got when I was a rookie from my lieutenant.
It's funny you say that, Ed, because it was your time. It was Giuliani's policing, and obviously when you were working there, that influenced me into law enforcement. Watching the cops come into Bushwick and clean it up, and those same cops mentored me actually and geared me towards law enforcement.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny when I began aggressively policing here, because I brought the same strategies to Baltimore, and a lot of cops had left. They were disgusted with this department. They left, they went to the counties where it was safer and you made more money. They went to the state police. I come back and they see what's going on, had a big recruiting campaign, got them the same money as the counties. But I said, do you want to be part of, when we make history here, what do you want to tell your grandkids? I worked I quieted barking dogs my whole career, or I was there for the renaissance of a great city. Guys came back. Guys left. We got back homicide detectives, snipers, all kinds of highly trained people who wanted to be part of this. And that's what the public doesn't understand. It's a unique mindset that draws people to this work, and it's so valuable and so unique. And that's why I'm so saddened to see what's going on now.
I know it's a long shot, but I do wish one day to see your name running again for any office.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I think the city, state, country needs some real leaders. So this kind of this deviated a little bit from the discussion we're supposed to have. I think it was a great discussion, though. So, following with that, any thoughts of doing any political shows or correspondences on top of your radio?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to negotiate that now because I really want, because all these topics are things I want to talk about. I used to do a podcast, but then that was ended because it was very popular. I talked about all the stuff we're talking about. It was widely popular because that's how people listen now. First of all, again, this is an old mindset. Is people, how do people? You're younger than me, and people younger than you. What do? You're in the gym, you listen to a podcast. Mm-hmm. You're in the car, you listen to a podcast. Long form is what people listen to, and they don't get it. And then they felt that I did a podcast, and that people wouldn't listen live to the radio. It's two different things. Right. I'm talking sports on the radio. I was talking politics, and you two with me. We talk terrorism and active shooter situations and all the things going on in America right now with the rioting. And there's a thirst for it. People need to hear it. I do want to do it. I do plan to do it. one way or the other, I'm going to get back into doing that. So.
Great. Any other books in the making?
Yeah, I'm seriously thinking about another book soon. Kind of what we've been talking about the last, whatever it's been, just about policing in America, and talking about what worked. What worked with the genius of Jack Maple in New York, the way we reduced crime. And people said, I remember how hard it was to convince people who were like district attorneys and everybody involved in law enforcement. They told us, we proposed interrogating every prisoner, everybody locked up in New York City, everyone was interrogated every day. And I said, they'll talk. Jack said this. He's like, they will talk. We were told they'll talk when pigs fly. Okay, because you don't know the business. They talk because they want to get out from under their current charge. They have an open warrant. There's a lot of ways to negotiate this. And just because somebody got locked up for smoking crack in the street, that's not what we're looking for. But he may know who shot, John on the corner. Right. He lives in that neighborhood. Everybody knows who shot him, but they're not coming forward. Now we know, and that's not being done. So I just like to talk about the techniques that worked, why they worked, and the fact that this other thing that drives me crazy is people talk about this community policing, softer policing. First of all, nobody even knows what community policing means. And when we were at the height of it in New York, we had 2,245 people murdered that year. So we were stepping over bodies in the community. It's ridiculous. There's nothing to do with police work. It was all going to start talking to store owners and saying hello and people being shot to death. It's not what works. What community policing is making communities safer. And we did it. And what galls me the most is people talk about all the stuff you hear now. Police brutality, killing black men, all untrue, completely false. It's right out of the Nazi playbook. This was Goebbels. The bigger the lie, the more they believe. You tell a lie that's big enough, often enough, people will believe it. And that's what's being done in this country right now. That makes me sad because when we had the Renaissance, when I was here for the 3 years in Baltimore, we led the country in crime decline with major cities. However, we also reduced police-involved shootings. Civilian complaints went down. I got the community award from the NAACP because of community relations here. It's so maddening, and it's such a form of bearded racism because people who think they're doing good, they don't understand that the black community was the most thankful to me, and I was the closest with, because they needed it the most in Baltimore. It was the areas of Baltimore that are most impoverished, unfortunately, are African American by population. So who do you think appreciated it most? And this is what the public does not understand. And it really makes me mad. And it's there's so many stories I could tell. It's just, they think these misguided do-gooders and politically correct people, all the woke folk, who think you're destroying this country. I remember we were at a community meeting in Harlem. I wanted to put cameras in the projects. And I believe in technology big time. And we were making the pitch to the Harlem community up in the 2-8, 3-2. We're going to talk police lingo. So a young white woman, the Upper West Side, I found out, she steps up and says, "How dare you? Why would you do this? This is very Orwellian. You don't want to spy on people in this." An elderly black woman stood up and said, "Young lady, where do you live?" She was Upper West Side. She says, "Do you have cameras in your building?" She says, "I want them in mine." And it shot it down. Because this is a good example of, you don't live there. You don't know what people are going through in these communities. Don't speak for them. Let them speak for themselves.
Well, it's got to fit a narrative, though. So if it doesn't fit a narrative, it's not good.
Yes. Yeah, and there's an agenda going on in this country, and the narrative is that the police are out of control, and people are locked up for no reason. It's not borne out by any factual data. The facts are the complete opposite of what's being told to people in America. And that's another reason you could probably talk to this, Steve, about why guys are leaving, because it's like you're being lied about every day.
Right. And
it's hard. I don't know. You're going to go to work for people that think you're an animal. You're just out there as some racist brute who's going around stopping people, for no reason and beating people. And that's not what's going on. It never has.
No.
So before we let you go, we have two more things. One is I always like to ask our guests if there's one takeaway that our listeners can take from your experience, from your background, for our conversation. What do you think men, again, our population, should hear today?
Well, the one thing I would say is something I actually put in my book when I signed them, is like you can never tap out in life. And for the men out there, if it's a male audience, like statistically, more than half of you are going to get divorced. It's a soul-crushing experience. Soul-crushing. Some of you are going to get cancer. Some of you are going to have, lose loved ones, and we'll go through what I went through. I'm not the only person to be railroaded into prison. It happens all the time in this country, unfortunately. And I would tell people, and I mean this, never kill yourself. Because you don't know what's around the corner. Right? You don't, and you can never, ever tap out in life, to use an MMA metaphor. You can't, because you don't know what's going to happen. And I had no idea why prosecutors would get fired. When I was sitting in the hole in Atlanta, literally like sitting on the floor, two guys in the bunks, and I'm keeping the rats out with my feet at the door. A year from being the colonel of the Maryland State Police. You think I wasn't at the lowest depth of my life? You can never, ever give up. And I mean that. And you don't have to go through what I went through. You don't have to have stage 4 cancer. But you're going to encounter adversity. And you're going to want to throw in the towel because it's easy. But you can never do that. I just hope people take that message away, if nothing else.
Great message. I appreciate it. Stephen.
All right, liven it up a little bit, Ed. We like to end it in a fun way. All right, we had a New Yorker on before. He didn't do too good, but I have total confidence in you. So I'm going to ask you 3 trivia questions, all right? Being a fellow New Yorker, they're New York based, all right? I don't know what the prize is, but, whatever. Bragging rights, all right? So former NYPD guy. I did auxiliary myself out of the 104 for some time.
I lived there for a little while. I was in Mass for a while.
Yeah. Nice little area. All right. So if I'm a New York City police officer on patrol and I call for a bus, what am I calling for?
Ambulance.
Ding, 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 ding. That's an easy one. All right. You being command staff. If I get summoned to the Puzzle Palace, where am I going?
One Police Plaza.
That's 2. All right. Last but not least. All right. I'm a military history major in general. Did a lot of New York anthropology and first law enforcement agencies in New York. Why are green lanterns hung outside most station houses for the NYPD?
I was told because of the Irish heritage of the police department at the time. That's why the colors of the flag are green, white, and blue, and all. That's what I heard.
So, so there's multiple answers. So anthropology-wise, goes back to the Rattle Watch, which when it was a Dutch farming village, the first theoretical police departments, which were watches, were called the Rattle Watch, and whenever they were in service, would hang a green lantern outside of their station house for the village to see. So there's another answer. Okay. So we'll give you a partial on that one. So
well, that's why if you look at the NYPD, the real base color is not really blue; it's green.
It's green, yeah.
The highest medals in that department are green.
All right, I'll give you one more. Are you a Grace Papaya hot dog guy or a Nathan's guy?
Nathan's. Although I had the Grays, believe me. I went to Grays on 72nd Street.
I went to school on 66 in Amsterdam, so I ate at Grays a lot.
Yeah, I think Nathan's is 2 for 2 right now.
Yeah, it is.
I grew up a 9-iron from Coney Island. So okay. I was always in Coney Island going to Nathan's.
And tell me this, Ed, you have seen the movie The Warriors, right?
Of course. I have friends in that movie.
BK.
I'm sorry. I'll watch it tonight. Stop yelling at me. I'm getting grief.
One of my childhood friends, he's a little older than me. His name was Zeke. He was as dumb as an oyster, but he is actually in that
movie. My all-time favorite movie.
He's one of the scenes when they're traveling by, the broken down buses, the windows kicked. You see Zeke's bald head, and
that's awesome. Great job. That's all I got.
Last thing, if people want to follow you on social media or anything like that, any links that you want to share with them?
Yeah, it's Ed Norris at Twitter. I mean, I'm on Ed Norris. Excuse me. Ed Norris on Facebook. I'm at Twitter. Way Down in the Hole is the name of the book. And just if you Google my name, you'll see there's a million ways to get me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. The book's available. My radio show can be listened to live from anywhere in the world. You can listen on your phone or computer.
And that's on 105.7, right?
105.7. You get the Odyssey app. It's the name of the company. The parent company is Odyssey, AUDACY. You can listen anywhere in the world. So there's a lot of ways. Unfortunately, I'm very findable. I'd like to be less so in the future, but.
And I appreciate your time and talking to us. And I obviously cherish our friendship. And I'm looking forward to having you on the show again in the future, maybe more politics centric.
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. You guys too. Bye.
Bye-bye.